What keeps people trapped in being average?
I think if you were to ask them, many of them would say something to the extent of, I'm afraid of failing, if you like peeled it back. But I actually think that's false. I don't think anyone's afraid of failing. I think everyone's afraid of other people seeing themselves fail and getting judged for it.
And that's what's keep people trapped.
Right, because what it is a loss of status. Right? They're afraid of a loss of status. And you have there's short-term pain that you have to go through when you do anything new. Unless you're immediately successful, which almost no one is, you usually have to take a step back in order to take 2, 3, 10 steps forward, right? Like if you have a high-paying job, so I was a consultant, for example, and I had all the status for somebody at my age, working at a big firm. I graduated in 3 years. I had all that stuff. But then when I quit that to start basically being a personal trainer at a gym, that was a big decrease in status in terms of my like relative standing compared to my peers.
Because now you're starting something new. You have to break into an industry, and now you don't have credibility and relationships. Totally. You have to sell yourself all over again as a beginner.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. And I remember when I would have women come to the gym and be like, did you go to college? And I was like, I graduated magna cum laude from Vanderbilt. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, I remember thinking, wow, this doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. And so I was really well equipped for not what I was doing.
You were overqualified.
Yeah. And underqualified at the same time. Right. For the actual job. And so there's a big pill of humility that I think a lot of people aren't willing to take because it hurts to drop in status. Like, people are like, oh, you'll get there, man. Like, hey, we're rooting for you. And it's interesting because I remember the early days at the gym when I was like sleeping on the floor. A lot of my clients were like, good for you, chasing your dream, all that stuff, like really rooting for me. And, within 9 or 12 months, I had hired some people and I had a manager and I was able to not literally live at the gym, sleep there. And I remember pulled up one day and I walked in and like 4 or 5 of the ladies who'd been there for a while were like, boss man's here. Like, I thought you were too good for us. And they were saying it in jest, but I knew that there was like a hair of truth to it. And that was when I realized the truism, like everyone wants you to do well, but just not better than them. And so the people that will continue to root for you tend to be above you. And as you pass people, because hate only comes from below. Like no one above you is hating on you because they're not thinking about you. Because winners focus on the goal, losers focus on winners. And so it's hard
to be a creator and a critic at the same time.
You
don't see other authors leaving negative reviews for people's books on Amazon. They're not going there and saying, this is the worst book ever written, or you're regurgitating everything, or whatever it is. They're too focused on creating something and putting their art out there in the world. It's the critics who are unwilling to try.
On the sidelines.
Right. That's the challenging thing. So when you were saying there is when you were kind of living in the gym, building yourself up and not successful, you had more people rooting for you than once you started to surpass a certain level, a group.
Yeah.
Then they started to say, oh, okay, you're too good for us now.
And so what's interesting, so I think about this stuff a lot, but the closer people are to you when you're at your bottom, the more they'll root for you at the bottom. But as you pass them in whatever material thing your pursuit is, you remind them of the dreams. This is some paraphrasing of a conversation I had with Chris Williamson. You remind them of the dreams that they gave up on. And so you go from being the person who reminds them that they could go after their dreams to reminding them that they never went after them to begin with. And then what happens, at least this has been my experience, is that you go through this period where no one from your hometown or who knew you in the beginning approves. And then what happens is absolute strangers from the internet who never saw the beginning become a bigger fan of you because they can relate to the story. But because you weren't their next door neighbor, they don't feel blame for them not having achieved whatever yet. Because if everyone in your friend group, when you're coming up, they all see that, like, as on some level, in my opinion, they see that they have the exact same access to resources, opportunities that you do. And then for some reason they haven't done something. So it's painful because I think there's some sting of inadequacy that they probably self-judge as a result of that. Now, to be fair, plenty of people are secure and are very happy with their lives, which is awesome. But I think there's definitely some people who aren't as pumped about it, which then kind of gets into, like, to go all the way back to the very beginning. We say, like, why don't people do the stuff that they want to do? I think it's because they can't even hear their own voice, because the only voice they can hear is everyone else's, and they can, like, theirs is barely a whisper. And so I think, like, if I had to give myself a goal of what my story or journey or trajectory has been, It's been to make my voice the loudest one that I can hear, and for my approval of myself to be the one that I care the most about. I think Epictetus said something to the degree of, if you need someone else to bear witness to whatever the thing is, don't. You should be able to be your own witness. You should have enough integrity and belief in self. I'm massively paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but he said that, and I like when I've had really tough times, I write in this diary to myself, and it's to my 85-year-old self. And so, okay, you might really find this interesting. I think your audience will
I
really
do like this.
So there's something called the Solomon paradox. Are you familiar with this?
Explain it.
Okay. So the Solomon paradox basically states that humans give better advice to other people than they follow themselves.
Yes.
And like they've proven, they whitewash stats. They even describe people's own life to themselves, but change the names, etc., and then say, what should this person do? And what they recommend the person do differs from what the person actually does. And it's because we have some sort of emotional context of the situation, and so then we can make logical decisions as a result, and so then we make poor decisions, right? So take that as data point one. We give better advice to other people than we follow to ourselves. The second, kind of issue that I've had overall is I've never had a lot of success with the therapies and things like that personally. A lot of the time it's because I feel like I have to, one, provide huge amounts of context for a single decision, which becomes 90% of my conversation is just trying to give context around.
And then the session's over.
Right, exactly.
Like where we're going, yeah.
And the third part is aligned incentives, right? And I speak purely from a mechanistic perspective here, which is that if you pay someone, they want you to continue to see them.
100%.
It just is what it is. And Charlie Munger, I think, said people will ignore all sorts of facts if their paycheck relies on it, right? Like he thinks the entire wealth management industry is just a complete farce. And so he uses that as his example because he's like, they're incentivized to not see that they have no value add. Right. And so everyone rationalizes around that. And so you've got this misaligned incentive, you've got someone who doesn't have context, and you've also got this idea that we can give ourselves better advice than anyone else can. And so in thinking about those three things together, I was like, maybe I can be my own therapist, but don't do it from myself today. Talk to my 85-year-old self. And so I actually run these chats. It's my first morning meeting on Monday every week. It's called Solomon Time. And so I talk about what's on top of mind. Now I also
to self.
Yeah. So I chat it's like a DM chat. So it's like, hey, this is what's going on right now. And then it's future me, like my hat changes, and it's this is well, what would you why are you saying that? Like, what,
you psychologically go into that state of a future you.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And it's cool because that version of me,
it's not AI you. It's really
it's just me. That version of me has a completely aligned incentive. He wants me to win.
Yes,
more than anyone. Because at the end of the day, like, people don't want what's in your best interest. They want the version of you that best serves them. If there are hateful comments or there are whatever, it's like, your approval isn't the one that I'm going for.
Right.
And so it shields you because that's why you have earned my approval, and that is enough. And so like that's been my shield during that process, and we can talk about the launch stuff later, but there was a key moment